Welcome to the Landscaping Podcast. My name is Joel Barnett and I am your host. And today's episode is the 17th of our Instagram Live, where I'll ask a question during the week or get you guys to ask questions during the week on our Instagram and then answer them here on a Sunday night at 8:30. And then this episode gets released as a podcast on Thursdays. So before we get into the first question, we've got Liz Filmer from Liz Filmer Landscaping coming out this week. That is on the 8th of May. Only got a few more weeks till winter starts, but we'll get the first question is one that was in last week, but as I was writing it down in the show notes, I realised I misread it when I read it out. So it was from Rossi, and he asked what the going rate was for a qualified landscaper, but he prefaced it with when quoting. So I was just talking about what you pay him, but I assume he was talking about when quoting. So that comes down to what your hourly rate calculations are. So you need to work out that before you even start quoting for jobs. So you need to know what you should be charging per hour per person to recover your overheads, as well as pay your employees and all their entitlements. And basically, you need to work out how much you have to pay for everything that you're going to pay throughout a year, and then work it out in an hourly rate. So the way I did that was add up everything that you're going to pay throughout a year and then divide it by 220, because that's how many working days there would be in a year once you take away the 108 days for weekends. I think there's 12 public holidays, and you also want to take out 4 weeks of annual leave and 2 weeks of sick leave. Just so if your employer, you obviously have to pay the annual leave anyway for all your employees, whether it's in a year or whenever they leave. But you also want to assume they're going to take off every sick leave day, so that if they do, you've allowed for it. If they don't, then that's a bonus for you. So once you've worked out everything, and you've also got to add in your fuel, phone bill, car repayments, all not in materials because they'll be on the quote. But if you're leasing a shed or need to be able to buy tools, maintenance for tools and maintenance for vehicles, everything you're going to think you're going to spend in a year, put that into a big spreadsheet and add up, get a figure at the end, and then that's what you divide by 220 for your day rate. And then if you've got two guys, and then you divide that by 60, or that's when you can sort of change how you do it, whether you want to work out divided by 8, because you might work 8 hours in a day, but you're better off dividing it by a lower number like 6.5 or something, because you're not going to be productive for 8 hours in a day. So that's divided by 8 or 6.5 per person that you got working for you. And then that's how you work out your hourly rate per person. So you could go really specific and work it out, or like a qualified person might be this much, an apprentice might be this much, but I just work it out per person. So all their wages get thrown in, and that's how I do it anyway. So so that's why it's going to be different for everyone, because not everyone's overheads are the same. If you've been in business longer and you've got more leases and vehicles and all that sort of thing, it's going to be more expensive for you than someone who's just starting out and working out of their garage and only has their ute. Next question was from Andrew Bryce, and he said, "What's the best design programs out there for gardening?" So it really depends on what you like, what you're going to be using it for. If it's someone who's just wanting to, design if they're a home gardener and just wanting to design something for themselves based on what they've learned, looking at Instagram, reading books and that sort of thing, I think SketchUp could be the simplest one to use for doing that. And you can do a lot of tutorials online where you can learn how to do the basics of it, because you don't really need to go crazy and do 3D or anything like that. But if you're going to be doing actual landscape designs, then it really depends on where you want to work or what you're most comfortable with. So you probably want to look into the different programs like CAD or Vectorworks, and I think there'd be other ones as well, and work out what sort of features you want to get out of it and which one's the best to learn, because once you learn one, you don't want to have to relearn another one, because it just takes time that you don't want to have to spend. So you're better off researching it and seeing what you like best, what features you like best about them. And then, just get in contact with whoever supplies that, because they usually do their own courses as well, like little short courses. But I reckon their SketchUp seems like the most basic one to do basic designs if that's what you're looking to do. Dan Foreman has said, Joel, are you going to the LB landscaping show? So I don't know if I'll be going to that because I got to really knuckle down on making $1 to pay for the garden show and just start getting normal jobs done, because I spent just an enormous amount of time in the lead up to the garden show working on the garden show, and then while we're there, we're working on it, and then since then I've just been trying to catch up on things that we're getting caught behind. So it'll depend what we're doing at the time, but I would say I'm less likely to be there than likely. But you never know. It's only an hour up the road. But I think they finish it early as well. I think it finishes like 3 o'clock or something. Could be 4. But yeah, we'll wait and see. And Ashley James has piped up with a question. He said, no question, but stop this so-called feud between myself and Peter Donegan. One of us is a world-renowned garden designer and the other is an Irishman. I didn't say that. And he said the other is slightly better at growing flowers than the average person. Well, I wasn't going to mention it today, Ash, so there was no questions about it. So you're the one who's continuing it on. Cam from Abcam Horticulture, last week's episode, he said, do you think your podcast and others like it have created a community in the industry? I don't think so. So I think it's a pretty awesome community as it is. Like the two people the last 2 questions I read out, which were ones that came through live from Dan and Ash, are a good example of that. So I met them, I reckon both at the garden show initially, but then just through, I think Instagram is what creates a community, because then it's a good way to message people and see the projects they're working on. And yeah, there's a lot of people I messaged through Instagram first before, and then you meet them and it's like you already know them already. So I don't think the podcast has got anything to do with it. Like, it certainly makes me, it adds to my community, the people who I talk to, such as yourself, Cam, and yeah, people who I have on the episodes I talk to going forward. But I don't think outside of me, I don't think it makes a huge difference. But yeah, but it's saying I love to see more of the podcasts coming up. And you'd see, I forgot their name when I was first mentioning it, but I think it's Liam from Wild & Co. and Nick from Share Design. So they've started their podcast called the Australian Garden Podcast. So they're just to release the 2nd episode. I haven't listened to that one yet. Listened to the first, so I'll listen to that one tomorrow. But yeah, that's going to be another good one to add to the repertoire. And also, I'd mentioned landscaper Stacey had done a couple of episodes and then stopped for a while, but I saw she's just done her 3rd episode as well. So again, I haven't listened to that one yet, but yeah, there's a couple of Australian podcasts in the green industry popping up and doing episodes. So yeah, the more the merrier, I think. Honestly, I love seeing them. It's good to hear. Dan has said that I told a lie and we met on OnlyFans, but it was a garden show first and then OnlyFans. Beyond Landscapes said, any lessons learned from your beginning until now in terms of business and success? That is a good question. Obviously, there is a heap that you learn along the way. I reckon one of the big things I should have done was taken more advice from people who have been in business longer, and not necessarily just in the landscaping industry, but I remember my accountant telling me, well, it would have been 2009 when I took over the business. You should start a YouTube channel. I can't remember what the reasons were behind it, but I've said before, if I had done that, it would have been a bigger following on there. But then again, you can't just start a YouTube channel and things are going to go crazy. You need to actually provide quality content on there. It would be less important to do that back then because there weren't as many people watching it and you still get views. But yeah, you can't just create something like create a new page and think people are going to show up for no reason. You actually got to provide something for them to show up for. So yeah, it's one thing to get the advice, but knowing what to do with it is important as well. But again, was always told early on to set up separate business accounts for like pay as you go and the best to go in before it's actually due. So you're not having to come up with a lump sum as well. So that'd definitely be the most important thing that I would ever tell anyone when they're starting a business, is to set those separate accounts up. I reckon it'll be. I haven't listened to it yet. I'll probably when I finish this live, I'm going to download the audio book because I've got some credits to use. But I'm going to listen to the Profit First audio book, which is a system similar to doing that, setting up business accounts. From what I've heard, it seems a bit hardcore, and I don't know if I'll be able to do it as it says to do. But if you can pick up some things from it and do little bits and pieces, I think it'll be a good thing. And and one of them would be setting up different accounts. Well, that's the whole preface of it, is to set up different business accounts. But yeah, just at the moment, I've just got the PAYG one, so I'm looking at doing more of that. Dan from Revive Landscapes Living Walls said, if you were no longer allowed to be a landscaper or designer, what would you do? I do love this question. I've said a couple of times that I'd never come up with good questions like this when I see other people who are asking for questions. But next time someone comes up with one, I'm going to steal Dan's question and ask that, because I reckon it's a cracker. So I've had a couple of other jobs. Like before I started landscaping, I was working in hospitality and hated that, because just working with drunk people who were unreasonable. It was just horrible hours. I'd work split shifts sometimes. Of just, terrible. But that was when I was 18 and 19. And then I did landscaping. Then I worked at the bank, and I did love doing that. But as I was working my way up, I was getting sort of having to realise having to sort of toe the company line more. And that I didn't really like that. It's a little bit getting started. It was starting to get a bit political the higher you go up within the bank, and you'd have to do things you don't necessarily agree with. That'd be the case in any job, really. But I just didn't enjoy that part of it. But I loved the sales side of things, and just having goals to achieve. And then I've also tried to do. I tried to get a job at the CFA. Be a firefighter, and also they're called the Aviation Firefighting Authority or something. It's basically working at Avalon Airport as a firefighter out there. So I did it's almost like an obstacle course at both of them. So I applied and got through that stage, and then went and did a obstacle course at Fiskville before that was shut down. But I didn't drink the water or anything there. So that was pretty cool. So you'd get an oxygen tank on your back, and you'll get the full fireman kit, helmet and everything. And you had to, it was like crawling, like I had to slide backwards through a tunnel or something. I can't remember what it was, but it was a while ago. That was when I was still an employee. So it was like 15 or 16 years ago. So that was pretty cool doing all that. And then I had to go up and down a ladder, and I've never had any issues with going up and down ladders, like no issues with heights. But when I got down the bottom of the ladder, they said, "Are you scared of heights, are you?" So must have been a bit slow going down the ladder. And then with the aviation one, that was pretty cool. Again, another obstacle course kind of thing. I don't know. That's not the right word for it, but basically you had to, roll out a length of hose and do all these bits and pieces, and with the oxygen tanks on and the full fireman kit. And there was like a group of, I think, 10 of us, and we were doing it individually, one at a time, and everyone else was watching the other people while they went through. And everyone was taking like 6 minutes, and then some guy went and did it in like 5 minutes 20 or 5 minutes 15 or something. And everyone was saying, good job, because I don't think anyone ever cracked 5 minutes, because you were flying through that. And then I rocked up and did it in 4 minutes 30. So that was pretty exciting. But then I got to an interview stage, and they were asking me questions, and they just kind of kept asking the same question, but in a different way. So I kind of got a bit frustrated with them, with my answer. And then I think they were kind of testing to see how I react under pressure, and I obviously didn't handle that too well. So didn't end up being a firefighter. So I wouldn't do that either. So I honestly can't think of what I would be, because even if you were a firefighter, I would reckon it would be extremely boring, because you're sitting around waiting for something to happen, and then it's one extreme to the other. You have the adrenaline pumping. But yeah, but if money wasn't an issue, if I had an unlimited amount of money, I'd be happy to be retired. I could do that pretty comfortably. I'd love going for walks in the Otways or just doing, yeah. I like going for walks. So a bit weird, but that's not going to decrease as I get older because I'm already turning into an old man. But I reckon, yeah, if I wasn't landscaping, I would like to be retired. So as much as I do love landscaping, but I do also like not working. And Briscapes has said, what do you look for in an employee when you're hiring? Is it skill or commitment? Definitely commitment and passion. And basically, mainly what I'm looking for is someone who can follow simple instructions, which is one of the most challenging things to find, I'm finding. I've got an ad out at the moment, and it says, send your resume to joel@newsoulgardens.com.au. Please include an application letter. The application letter is the most important part of the application, so please treat it accordingly. And I would say 30% of people include the application letter and 70% don't even include one. And the ones that do include it, it's like 3 lines that is just completely generic that they've written, that they've sent with 50 other job applications. So no one puts any effort into it. They couldn't care less that they're just applying for jobs. So all I'm looking for is someone who even just changes the application letter to be job specific for the job I'm offering. It doesn't seem that hard, but it must be because no one does it. So yeah, obviously not looking for any skill when I'm hiring. You just want someone who's passionate and loves landscaping, which, hard to find. Chris from Sea Spray Landscapes said, how do you manage your time off? I'm always super busy and feel guilty about taking time to go away. Do you have a set time you always take, or just listen to your body when it's time for a break? So I'm lucky where my body never tells me that I need to relax. Like if it ever gets a bit sore, I just work through it and it usually works out all right. So it's obviously just a small thing that I have hurt. I find at the end of the year, like I reckon around October, November, my body starts to feel it. So it probably does tell me about then. But other than that, we just take time off whenever it works best for my wife and kids, basically. And we usually go away with groups of other families. So just whenever everyone else can get time off, we'll just make it work. Because it's only ever, and we also don't take, when I say time off, we'll usually go Friday, Saturday, Sundays, and maybe the Monday. So it's only ever 2 days really when you don't include the weekend. So it's so I don't really take that much time off, but also don't need to, because like on the school holidays, I look after my kids on Mondays and Tuesdays, so I don't actually work those days. So there's 4 days during the each school holidays that I take off. And there's other days where I'll just have an office day. So I'm not on site every single day for 5 days a week or 6 days a week. So yeah, it's just and Chris I think he said he's been in business for 4 years. So I would have found it a lot harder to do that in the first 4 years or the first 8 years. But as you get more advanced in your career and mature and more comfortable in the business, you realise that your life is more important than the business. And if you take 2 weeks off, the work will still be there after 2 weeks when you get back. And you can actually, if your body does start to break down, you can end up hurting yourself and having to take 6 or 8 weeks off. And you're not actually on holidays, you're just in hospital or you can't move. So much better to take time off and ask for forgiveness rather than permission from your clients. Like it's good to give them as much notice as you can, but if they're not going to be forward to you doing it or not keen about it, it's it's bad luck, because like I said, you might come back refreshed to do a better job than what you were going to do anyway. And at the end of the day, it's only a week or 2 weeks or a couple of days. So I reckon you're better off just doing it. And and I don't know if you've got kids or not, but if you've got kids, then you're going away and making memories with them. So there's so many more positive things to taking time off rather than just pushing through and having to get that job done. It's easier said than done. It's just that comes up a lot around Christmas, where getting a job finished is the most important thing in the world. And if you don't get it done, the world's going to end. But yeah, we've had jobs that were like that, and then we didn't get them finished. And turns out we could come back in January and get them finished. So, and that would have been 7 years ago. And the clients aren't thinking about that guy who didn't finish his job before Christmas 7 years ago. So things seem like they're a big deal at the time, but they're not. So, but spending, like looking after your body, spending time with kids, that is a big deal. That's a lot more important than getting someone's jobs finished. Bola Strange said, benefits and cons of being a sole trader compared to a company. So I reckon it's definitely a good question to ask an accountant. I have thought about getting my accountant on, but then thought, that could be a bit of a dry episode. So I don't know if I'll do that. But as far as I'm aware, so I was a sole trader for 1 year and then became a company with family trust. So I'm not aware of anything other than the benefits of the company, other than protecting yourself from liability. And I don't know how that works, but that's one of the things people seem to say that's for. But we've also set up a family trust, so there's certain tax implications with that. So if we ever made it profit, I can pass part of that off to my wife and kids, so that I don't have to pay as much tax. But yeah, other than that, I don't know what the benefits are. But I do know setting up a company and a trust and then also getting the tax done as that every year is a lot more expensive than if you're a sole trader. So definitely have a chat to an accountant about what the benefits are and whether it's going to be worthwhile doing that. And it can also be good if because I was hoping to get into property investing at some stage, which I probably don't know if I ever will, but you can also have multiple businesses under the one umbrella. So yeah, it depends what your goals are. But if you're just looking to do landscaping and us being a sole trader, that could be completely fine to just stay like that. Cascade Landscape said, what's the best construction tip you've ever received? Like putting a screw in your packers for decking. So he's talking about when you've got packers and you're putting them in between decking boards and when you're screwing them off, they can sometimes fall down between the two boards. So if you put a screw in the side of one, then that sort of creates a T, so it can't fall down between the boards. I haven't received any tips I can recall, but every now and then I'll come up with a great idea and just think, I don't know, I wish I had thought of that earlier. So one of them is with when we get laser levels, when they come in the box and they've got that foam protection around it so that it doesn't get damaged when it moves around. It seems like with the receiver, you had to wind it, you had to wind the receiver all the way in before it would fit in the case holder. So if you got it out, you got to unwind it and then put it back onto the staff. So I just cut a section out of the foam so that the receiver sat in there perfectly. And it's the most simple thing in the world, but it's crazy how awesome it is that we did that. So then you can just take it off the receiver, put it straight in. And there was a time where we got sick of rolling up hoses. So I bought one of those hoses on the retractable reel. So we'd carry that around and you could take it out, use a hose and then wind it back up again with that. But it got a bit heavy and it was full of water. So, and you've also got to kind of, unwind it all by holding it all because you can't just pull on it because it's not attached to anything. But there's certain things like that. So it's nothing I've received, but there's just little things like that you receive that you learn along the way. But you don't really think about them because they're so simple, like the screw in a packer. There's nothing else I can think of. I know there will be things, and I think they'll come to me again when I don't try and think of it. But sorry, I don't have any better answer for that. The Life of Bow River said, what's one reason to become an adult apprentice in landscaping and one reason not to? So I reckon one reason, a clear one, would be if you because it's obviously one of the greatest jobs in the world, being a landscaper. So if you're wanting to do it, it's obvious, if you've got a passion for it, then you're better off doing it, whether you're an adult or a junior. Adult apprentice is just anyone who's over 20 years old. So then that's when you start getting paid adult apprenticeship wages. The only reason I can think of not to could potentially be the wage, because obviously it's not going to be as high as what you could get possibly somewhere else. But in retail, the wages are pretty low in that as well. And you're going to learn a lot more being a landscaper, and then have potential to go out and work for yourself. Or there's always jobs for qualified landscapers who are good. So you could just be a subcontractor, work for a couple of different companies, or there's plenty of options out there. And then you can also niche down into a certain part of landscaping after that as well. So you might just like doing paving, or just like doing decks, or there's a lot of different things you could branch out into after being a landscaper. So the only reason not to would be the wage. The annoying thing is having to go to school as well. So I was 21 or 22 when I started. So not that old, but it certainly felt like I was ancient when I went to trade school. And because I'd studied horticulture beforehand as well, I knew a lot of what they were trying to teach me. So that was pretty tough, because back in the day, it was a certificate degree in horticulture. It wasn't a certificate in landscaping. So that was pretty tough. And you're going there to school with a lot of people who just have to be there because that's part of being an apprentice. They don't actually want to be there. So they're just hanging out for lunch to get there so they can go to the pub for the whole hour. And I prefer to go to study something when people actually want to study it. You're enjoying it a lot more. So that's another negative to it. But other than the wage and having to deal with the Neanderthal apprentices that you come across, there's not many negatives to it. And the last question is from Glenn MC03. I don't know if it's Glenn Mac or Glenn Mick. Does Dan Foreman have the biggest forearms in the game? I haven't actually noticed his forearms, but I assume they'd be quite large, being a landscape construction person. But I reckon he'd have some decent calves as well, because he does that weird looking skateboard thing that's joined in the middle. I can't remember what it's called. Might be called a mountain board or mountain skating or something. But I've seen him getting around on that. So he'd have pretty strong legs, I reckon. But I assume he'd have decent forearms as well. Never heard anyone call him Dan Forearm though. So I assume that would catch on if he had big ones. But that's the last question for today. So thank you again for everyone who submitted a question during the week. Like I've said many times, I love doing these. So I'll be continuing on and putting up a question box during the week. And as I mentioned at the start, Liz Filmer from Liz Filmer Landscaping is out this week. So she's a landscaper in Gippsland. So out in their Sale, and just moved to Orbost as well. So it's just getting a bit of a different point on things from someone who's outside of the major cities. So that was a good chat with her. And she's starting to wind down the business, but also just about to do the biggest job she's ever done. So it was good timing for that. Thank you very much again for everyone who tuned in, and we'll see you next week.